How could I have been so stupid? I should have known better than to trust him. My name is Sophia, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the tale of how I took back everything I was robbed of. I'll be using pseudonyms for privacy reasons, especially since my career as a prominent lawyer in this state demands that I maintain a level of anonymity. The truth? It's darker than you think. And the ending? Well, let's just say Xander never saw it coming. I had always prided myself on my achievements. I graduated from law school, built a successful career, and made a name for myself in the legal world. But despite all of this, my marriage to Xander, the man I had been with for over a decade, seemed to fall apart. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. He was a successful businessman, and I was a well-respected lawyer. We lived in a beautiful house, enjoyed vacations, and shared a life that many envied. However, beneath the surface, things were falling apart. I was so focused on my career, working long hours, trying to prove myself in a male-dominated field, that I didn't realize how much Xander had changed. At first, it was small things. He was more distant, more irritable. He began spending more time working and less time at home. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was just busy with his business ventures. But deep down, I felt a growing sense of unease. It wasn't until Xander started taking frequent business trips that I started to question everything. I tried to confront him, but each time he'd dismiss my concerns with a shrug or a casual excuse. "It's just work, Sophia. You know how it is." But something inside me kept whispering that it was more than that. I had always been a trusting wife, but the signs of something being off were undeniable. I started noticing his behavior more closely. His late nights, his reluctance to communicate, the unexplained absences. The turning point came one evening when I stumbled upon his old laptop. It was an accident, really. I was just looking for some files, but what I found sent my world crashing down. I discovered a secret Facebook account, one that he had clearly kept hidden from me. As I scrolled through his messages, I found the truth that I had been too afraid to admit. Xander had been having an affair with a woman who was younger, more beautiful, and apparently more interesting to him than I was. The messages between them were explicit, full of affection and promises. My heart dropped as I read through the details. The late-night rendezvous, the secret trips, the love declarations. How had I missed this? How could I have been so blind? But even worse was the realization that Xander had been putting me down for years, criticizing my appearance, making me feel less than. He had always told me that my work was a distraction and that I wasn't the woman he had married anymore. "Why do you even care about this job so much? You're not a supermodel, Sophia. You can't keep me happy just with looks." His words echoed in my mind, a harsh reminder of everything I had ignored in the name of love. In that moment, a mixture of emotions flooded my mind: disbelief, anger, sorrow. But what struck me the most was the crushing sense of humiliation. How could he do this to me? After everything? I couldn't hold back the tears. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, wanting answers, needing to confront him. The moment he answered, I could feel the weight of the conversation in the pit of my stomach. Should I confront him now? Or wait for a better moment? "Are you cheating on me, Xander?" I asked, my voice shaky yet determined. "I have proof." His response was colder than I could have imagined. "Sophia, you're just not that interesting anymore," he said nonchalantly, as though it was nothing. "You're always working, always focused on your cases. I need someone who can keep up with me. And honestly, you're not even close to being a supermodel. You've let yourself go." I wanted to scream. The pain was unbearable, but I held it together. The truth was out there, hanging in the air between us. But in that moment, what struck me the hardest was the utter indifference in his voice. His words cut through me, but they also ignited something inside me, a fire I had forgotten existed. I had to fight back. But how? In the silence that followed his callous remark, I asked myself the question that had been haunting me. Had I wasted all these years on someone who never valued me? But my thoughts were interrupted by his final declaration. "I'm done, Sophia. I've already made up my mind. I'll file for divorce soon, and I'll be with someone who deserves me." It felt like the ground had fallen away beneath me, but I was determined. He thought he could break me, but I wasn't going to let him. The battle had just begun. I hung up the phone, my hands still trembling, but not from fear. This time it was anger. The reality of what Xander had just said to me hit me like a slap in the face. Yet there was something else. A strange, almost surreal sense of relief. He had finally said it out loud. He had acknowledged what had been gnawing at me for so long. But more than that, his words stung deeply, not just because of the affair, but because of how he had belittled me. His indifference, his complete disregard for everything we had built together. And yet, there was this part of me that still couldn't quite believe it. Could this really be the man I had loved for so long? Could this person, the one I had stood by for over a decade, truly be capable of such cruelty? My mind raced as I replayed every moment of our marriage, the highs and the lows. Had I missed the signs all along? Was I that naive? But no matter how many times I tried to make sense of it, the truth was undeniable. Xander had never been the man I thought he was. I had placed so much trust in him, so much belief in our love, and all along he had been preparing to discard me. His words echoed in my ears. "You're not that interesting anymore. You're not the woman I married." I had always been proud of the woman I had become. Accomplished, independent, and strong. But in Xander's eyes, none of that mattered. I was simply an accessory to his life, someone to fill the role of a wife while he did whatever he pleased. The tears I had been holding back finally came, but they weren't for the man I had loved, they were for myself. For how much I had sacrificed for someone who had never truly seen me. It wasn't long before I knew I had to act. No more second-guessing, no more allowing myself to be a passive participant in a marriage where I was nothing more than a footnote in his story. I wasn't going to let him walk all over me, not after everything he had put me through. This wasn't just about a divorce, it was about reclaiming my life. It was about taking back my power. As I walked through the house that no longer felt like home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. What was going to happen next? How would this all play out? There was still so much uncertainty, and yet deep down I knew that I couldn't let this break me. I wouldn't let it. How could I, after everything I've worked for? Then it occurred to me. What if I had to fight for what was rightfully mine? I wasn't just talking about the material things. It was more than that. It was my dignity, my self-respect, my future. Xander had tried to destroy all of it, but I wasn't going to let him succeed. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, lawyers, and late nights spent reading through the prenup. The one thing I had overlooked in my emotional turmoil. How could I have been so careless? But as I sat at my desk reviewing the documents with a steely resolve, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of emotions. Fear and relief, anxiety and empowerment. The very thing Xander had pushed so hard for would now be my weapon. I had the power to take back what was rightfully mine, to claim my share of his empire. But I also knew that this was going to be a long, hard battle. Could I really go through with it? The thought of it brought me no joy. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting myself, my future, and the life I had built. Was I being too harsh? My mind kept coming back to the same question. But I already knew the answer. No, I wasn't. Xander had crossed the line long ago, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. I picked up the phone and dialed Xander's lawyer, ready to take the next step. I could already imagine the look on his face when he realized that I wasn't going to back down. When I told him I was ready to fight for everything I was entitled to, I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of satisfaction. The time for hesitation was over. But as the conversation went on, I found myself wondering, what if he hadn't cheated? What if things had turned out differently? Would I still be the woman sitting here, alone, preparing for a bitter divorce? No. There was no turning back now. There were too many lies, too much hurt. What if I was wrong to trust him? The question lingered in my mind, but I already knew the answer. I had to move forward. No matter how painful it would be, no matter how much it would hurt, I had to fight for myself. As I hung up the phone, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. This wasn't just about a man who had cheated, it was about standing up for myself, and for once, I was ready to do whatever it took. The following morning, after a sleepless night filled with restless thoughts and furious planning, I knew it was time to confront Xander. He had filed for divorce. He had called me names, accused me of being a failure, and yet, I had always believed in the sanctity of our marriage, until now. His betrayal had cut deeper than I could have imagined, and yet, it also stirred something in me I hadn't felt in a long time. The need to fight. I had moved out of our home and into my childhood house, the one that was rightfully mine. The house, with its familiarity and comfort, was a reminder of who I had been before I ever met Xander, strong, independent, and ready to build a future of my own. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, I felt a strange sense of power slowly taking root. It wasn't about the house or the material things. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, my dignity, and my place in the world. I wasn't going to let Xander's actions define me, but there was still one thing that gnawed at me: the confrontation. I knew it would come. Xander, always so self-assured and arrogant, would want to confront me, to perhaps convince me that his affair and his coldness toward me were nothing more than a minor setback, a phase that we could work through. But there was no working through this. Not for me. I was sitting in the living room flipping through case files when I heard the knock at the door. It wasn't a loud knock, but a hesitant one. I stood up slowly, wiping my hands on my pants as if to remove any lingering tension. I already knew who it was: Xander. When I opened the door, there he was, standing in front of me, looking far less confident than the man who had stormed out just days ago. His suit was well tailored, his hair still perfectly combed, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't there before: defeat. "Sophia, we need to talk," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. I raised an eyebrow. "Do we?" I replied coldly. "I thought we were done talking. You filed for divorce, remember? We agreed to let lawyers handle it from here on out." His expression faltered, and for a moment I saw the mask crack. "Listen, No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You don't get to explain yourself. You don't get to come in here and act like nothing happened. I know what you've been doing, Xander, and I'm done with it." He shifted uncomfortably, his hands finding the pockets of his jacket. "I'm sorry, okay?" he said, but his voice lacked sincerity. "I was wrong. Can't we just figure this out? Maybe we can try again?" I couldn't help the small, bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "Try again? After everything you've done? After you tore our marriage apart with your lies, your cheating? You want to try again?" I shook my head. "You're delusional." Xander's face turned a shade of crimson and his jaw clenched. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Always acting like you've got it all together? You're just a lawyer, Sophia? You think that makes you special?" His words, meant to hurt, felt like nothing more than a passing breeze. "You're right," I said slowly, taking a step closer to him. "I do think I'm better than you, because unlike you, I have integrity, I have self-respect, I don't tear people down to build myself up." For a moment, the tension between us felt like it was suffocating the air, but I wasn't done. "And don't even think for a second that your little affair is going to ruin me. You'll be the one to suffer for it, not me, because I'm going to fight for everything you tried to take from me." His eyes darted around nervously, clearly not expecting this level of confrontation. "You don't have to do this, Sophia," he said weakly. "We can still fix things, we don't have to go to court. I'll give you what you want. Just please, I can't lose my business. Please, don't do this." I felt a surge of satisfaction, mixed with a pang of something I didn't quite want to name. For all his arrogance, for all his manipulation, Xander was finally on the receiving end of consequences. You should have thought about that before you cheated, before you insulted me, before you betrayed me in every way possible. I could see the desperation building in his eyes, but I wasn't going to give him an inch. "You already lost, Xander. You lost the moment you chose her over me. You lost the moment you thought I would just roll over and let you take everything. You've made your bed, now you have to lie in it." Xander stood there for a long moment, his face pale and strained. He didn't say anything else, and after a moment he turned on his heel and left. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality I hadn't expected. As I stood in the silence of the room, I could feel my heart pounding. I wasn't sure whether it was from the adrenaline or from the pain of confronting the man I had once loved so deeply. But I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The fight ahead wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had finally found my voice, and nothing would stop me from reclaiming my life. The days following my confrontation with Xander were a blur. I had never anticipated this level of emotional turmoil, standing firm in the face of someone who had once been my everything. But I wasn't just standing firm for myself, I was standing firm for everything I had worked for, everything I had built. I had spent years letting him diminish my worth, convincing myself that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't as successful as he was, but no more. I had to fight for what was mine. I wasn't just fighting for a business or a house, I was fighting for my dignity, for my future. A few days after the confrontation, Xander's lawyer called me. I was ready. My mind was sharp, and I had prepared myself for whatever they might throw my way. I knew Xander had been planning to drag out the divorce, hoping I would give up on the prenup, hoping I would back down from claiming my rightful share of his business. But that wasn't going to happen. I met with my own lawyer, a trusted colleague who had always respected my tenacity. Together, we went through every detail of the prenup. The clause regarding infidelity is very clear, my lawyer reminded me, her voice calm but resolute. If he's cheated, you are entitled to half of his business. That's the law. The weight of that statement hung in the air. It wasn't just legal, it was personal. Xander thought he could walk all over me, but the truth was, I had more than just the law on my side. I had my own resolve. The pain of his betrayal was raw, but I wasn't going to let it defeat me. As I sat across from Xander's lawyer, Jake, in the small, quiet cafe, I could feel the tension building. Jake was a capable lawyer, but I knew something he didn't. He didn't know me as well as he thought he did, and he certainly didn't understand the full extent of the case he was handling. Xander's arrogance had clouded his judgment, and now it was about to bite him. Jake looked uncomfortable as he sat across from me, shifting in his seat and avoiding my gaze. He was clearly out of his depth. I couldn't help but smile inwardly. He didn't realize he was about to be caught in the crossfire of this battle. "Jake," I started calmly, but with a touch of authority in my voice. "Let me make one thing clear. You've been misled by your client. He's the one dragging this out, not me. Don't let him fool you." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice uncertain. I leaned forward slightly, letting my words sink in. "Did Xander tell you that he cheated on me? Did he tell you that he has been sleeping with another woman for months? Did he tell you about the prenup?" I watched as Jake's face turned pale. The truth was hitting him hard, and I could see the realization dawning on him. "No, he didn't mention that," Jake admitted, his voice faltering. I leaned back, folding my arms across my chest. "I figured as much. He never mentioned the prenup to you, did he? He probably thought I'd forget about it, or that you wouldn't check the details. But I didn't forget, and I'm not going to let him get away with this." Jake looked at the papers I slid across the table. He picked them up slowly, his hands trembling as he scanned through the documents. There it was, in black and white, the clause that Xander had hoped I'd overlook. The clause that would ensure I got what was rightfully mine. After several moments, Jake looked up at me, his expression changing. I see. This changes things. I didn't realize how much trouble Xander was in." "Trouble?" I echoed, letting the word hang between us. "No, Jake, this isn't just about trouble. This is about accountability. Xander thought he could manipulate everyone around him, his lawyers, me, even himself. But I'm not letting him get away with it. I'm fighting for everything he took from me, and you're either going to help me do that, or you're going to step aside." Jake nodded slowly, clearly nervous, but now understanding the full weight of the situation. I'll have to talk to Xander. I didn't know about the affair or the prenup. This is going to change how we approach the case." I stood up, gathering my things. "Good. Tell him that the game has changed, Jake, and this time I'm the one in control." As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a sense of triumph. This was my moment. The moment where I stopped being the victim and became the victor. Xander had tried to break me, but he didn't know what he was dealing with. A few days later, I received a call from Xander. I knew it was coming. He couldn't hide forever. The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. "What the hell did you say to my lawyer, Sophia?" he demanded, his words sharp. "Why did he quit on me? What did you tell him?" I couldn't suppress the satisfaction that bubbled up inside me. "Oh, I didn't tell him anything. He's just realizing that he's been played, Xander. Your lies, your cheating, your arrogance. It's all catching up to you. I didn't have to do anything except give him the truth. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Xander spoke again. His tone flat, resigned. I'm not going to lose everything. You can't take everything from me. I smiled, feeling an overwhelming sense of control. I'm not taking anything from you, Xander. You did this to yourself. You chose this path, and now you have to walk it. The legal battle was just beginning, but with each passing day, I felt more and more certain that I would win. Xander had underestimated me. He thought he could break me, but in doing so, he had only unleashed the woman I had always been, the woman who would not be intimidated, the woman who would fight with everything she had. And I was just getting started. The weeks following my confrontation with Xander and his lawyer were a whirlwind of legal meetings, documents being filed, and strategic planning. The case wasn't just about money or assets, it was about power, dignity, and taking control of my life. Every step felt like a battle. But with each victory, no matter how small, I felt stronger. There was no going back now. I had already taken the first step, and I wasn't going to stop until I got what I deserved. My new life was taking shape. I had moved into my childhood home, a place where I could breathe again, where I could rediscover myself without the constant weight of Xander's expectations or manipulation. I started to refocus on my career, diving back into cases I had once put on the back burner. The law had always been my passion, but it had been drowned out by my efforts to keep our marriage intact. Now, I was putting my energy into what mattered most, myself. But despite the newfound strength, the legal battle with Xander was wearing me down. Each phone call with his lawyer was a reminder of the mess he had created. The prenup, the affair, the lies, it was all coming to light, and Xander was scrambling, trying to salvage whatever he could. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Xander. I wasn't surprised anymore. He was desperate to control the narrative. This time, his voice was different. Sweaty and anxious, as if he was clutching at straws. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew it wouldn't be good for me. Sophia, you have to stop this. We can't let it go to court. You know what's at stake here, he began, his voice dripping with desperation. I don't want to lose everything. Please, let's figure something out. We can settle this without going through all of this mess. Just give me some time. For a split second, a part of me was tempted to believe him, to take the easy way out and avoid the public humiliation of a drawn-out trial. But then I remembered all the times he had dismissed me, belittled me, and taken me for granted. He wasn't the man I had once loved. He was the man who had betrayed me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Xander, I said, my voice calm but firm. There is no negotiating anymore. You made your choices. You cheated. You lied. And now, you're going to face the consequences. There was a long silence. I could feel the tension crackling through the phone line as Xander's frustration began to bubble up. You're making a huge mistake, Sophia. Do you know what you're really doing? You'll ruin everything for both of us. Do you think I want this? I never wanted this? I clenched my fist, the anger I had kept at bay for so long surging within me. You think this is about you? I asked sharply. This is about me. This is about me taking back my life, my dignity, my worth. I won't be the woman you walk all over anymore, Xander. You lost that privilege the moment you made your choice. I could hear him pacing on the other end, and it filled me with a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time in a long while, Xander was the one on the defensive. He was scared. And that scared man was about to learn what it meant to face the consequences of his actions. Okay, Xander finally muttered. What do you want, Sophia? Name your price. Let's end this without dragging it out. I'll give you whatever you want, just stop this. I paused. The words he was saying were so full of regret, so full of fear, but it didn't matter anymore. It wasn't about money, and it wasn't about revenge. It was about standing tall and demanding respect. I want my fair share, I said simply. The prenup is clear, half of your business, and that's non-negotiable. Half? His voice went cold again, the anger in his words unmistakable. You really think I'm just going to hand that over to you? After everything we've been through? I smiled bitterly, knowing this was the moment of reckoning. You don't have a choice, Xander. The prenup is clear, and I have all the proof I need. This isn't about a fight for your business. It's about you finally facing the reality of what you've done. You betrayed me. and now you'll pay the price." The next few days were filled with back-and-forth exchanges between our lawyers. Xander's attempts to get out of the prenup seemed to fall flat, and it was clear that his efforts to settle quietly were failing. I was prepared for a long legal battle, but the more Xander fought, the more determined I became. There was no way I was backing down. As I walked into the courtroom for our first hearing, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The tension, the anxiety, it was all gone. I was no longer the woman who had stood by silently while her husband undermined her. I was the woman who had taken control, who had found her strength in the midst of betrayal. The case was long, drawn out, and emotionally draining, but with every passing day, Xander's arrogance and lies became more exposed. The affair, the lies, the financial manipulations, they all came to light. And with each new revelation, my resolve grew stronger. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for my peace of mind, for the chance to walk away from the wreckage he had left behind. And then came the day I had been waiting for. Xander called me again, this time without the arrogance, without the bravado. His voice was tired, almost defeated. "Sophia," he said quietly, "I'm done. I can't keep fighting. Just take what you want. Just end this." It was a moment of victory, but it didn't feel as sweet as I thought it would. Xander had broken, but I had already broken long before, and it had taken this long battle to rebuild myself into someone who could finally stand up for what she deserved. The divorce was finalized soon after. Xander gave up half of his business as stipulated in the prenup, and I walked away with everything I had fought for. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more Xander. And as I walked away from that chapter of my life, I finally felt free. Free to move on, free to be the woman I had always been meant to be. My life was mine again. The future looked brighter than ever. The days following the finalization of the divorce were a mix of liberation and reflection. As I signed the last set of papers, finalizing the settlement with Xander, it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The legal battle had been long and draining, but in the end it was a victory. It wasn't just about the business, the prenup, or the financial gain. It was about something deeper. I had taken back control of my life. For the first time in years, I felt like me again. I stood in the courthouse lobby holding the final court orders in my hand and felt a strange sense of finality. The man who had once meant everything to me, who had been the center of my world, was now just a shadow of a past life. My future was no longer tied to his mistakes or his deceit. I had my own future to build. The path ahead was open, and it was mine to walk. I didn't look back. The first few weeks after the divorce were quiet. There were no angry calls from Xander, no more confrontations, no more lawyers, just silence. It was a silence I had longed for. I focused on myself. The work that had always been a part of my life became my anchor. I threw myself back into my career, taking on challenging cases, helping clients who had been wrong just as I had been. It felt good to do something I loved, to immerse myself in something that was entirely mine. But it wasn't just work that filled the void. I began to reconnect with the parts of me that I had neglected for years. I took long walks in the park, read books for the sheer joy of it, and spent time with friends I had distanced myself from when Xander and I were together. I rediscovered a part of myself I had almost forgotten. The part of me that didn't have to live in anyone else's shadow. I also started doing things for myself, something I had never truly allowed myself to do before. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to do but had never found the time for. It was freeing. Each brushstroke was a release, a way to express emotions I couldn't always put into words. And then there were the nights where I sat alone, sipping wine by the fire, reflecting on how far I had come. The moments when the pain of my past no longer felt suffocating, but instead became a source of strength. I had endured a betrayal that no one should ever have to go through. But I had survived. Not only had I survived, but I had thrived. One evening, I was sitting in my new home, a spacious place that reflected the life I was building for myself. The house was modern, with large windows that let in the light. There was a sense of openness, a stark contrast to the cramped, dark spaces of my old life with Xander. I could breathe here. I could think. As I sipped my tea, I received a message on my phone. It was from an unknown number. I opened it, and it was a text from Xander's mistress. "Sophia, I don't know where to begin. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know the full story. I didn't realize how much damage we caused you. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but more than that, I felt nothing. The rage I once felt towards her, the bitterness I carried with me for so long, had faded. It had all become so irrelevant. She wasn't the person who had destroyed my life. She wasn't the one who had betrayed me. That responsibility lay solely with Xander. I typed a response, my fingers steady as I composed my thoughts. "It's too late for apologies. I'm moving on. I suggest you do the same." I hit send and put the phone down. The message sent, the chapter closed. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was me, and I was stronger than I had ever been. The following month, I received an invitation. It was from one of my old law school colleagues, someone I had worked with briefly before life with Xander had consumed so much of my time. She was hosting a gala for a new charity initiative, and she asked me to be a guest of honor. I hesitated at first. Social events hadn't been my thing in years. Xander had never been a fan of public events, and I had grown used to hiding in the background, but something inside me nudged me to go. This was a chance to step back into the world I had been so removed from. It was an opportunity to show not just Xander, but myself, that I was fine without him, that I was thriving. The evening of the gala, I donned a sleek black dress and walked into the venue with my head held high. The room was filled with people I hadn't seen in ages, former colleagues, old friends, and strangers. But none of them mattered. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I wasn't there to seek validation. I was there for me. As I mingled with people, I realized that for the first time in years, I was truly happy. I wasn't trying to live up to anyone else's expectations. I wasn't trying to prove myself to Xander or anyone else. I was living for me. The evening ended with a toast. My colleague raised her glass and spoke of success, of giving back to the community, and of never letting anything or anyone define you. I raised my glass too, smiling. I knew that no matter what had happened in the past, my future was mine to shape, and I was ready to take it. I had learned a lot over the past few months. Not just about Xander, not just about relationships, but about myself, about how strong I truly was. The woman who had once been broken by betrayal had become someone who knew her worth, who would never settle for less than she deserved. I had faced the darkest parts of my life and emerged victorious. I had taken back my power, and now it was time for me to move forward, no longer bound by the past, but living in the present and embracing the future. I had come out stronger, and nothing, not even Xander, would ever take that away from me. The weeks following the gala were a blur of excitement, self-discovery, and quiet moments of reflection. I had finally allowed myself to move on, but the path ahead felt different. I had reclaimed my independence, and the future now held endless possibilities. The woman who had once been torn apart by betrayal was no longer afraid to embrace what life had to offer. I could see the horizon in front of me, and it was a beautiful, uncharted place. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, I reflected on how far I had come. It had been months since the divorce, and I had started to truly live again. It wasn't just the external changes, the new home, the successful cases at work, the new circle of friends. It was the internal transformation that mattered most. I had finally let go of the chains that had kept me bound to a toxic past, and now I could breathe freely. I thought about the pain that Xander had caused, but, more than that, I thought about the lessons I had learned from it. The years spent in his shadow had made me forget what it felt like to be fully alive. But now, I remembered. I felt the rush of possibility in my chest again. The same feeling I had once had when I first started law school, the feeling of endless potential, of being unstoppable. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone or anything take that away from me. One of the most rewarding aspects of my new life was how I rediscovered my relationships. When I was married to Xander, I had distanced myself from many people, friends, family, colleagues, because I had been so consumed by my need to keep the marriage intact, to prove something to Xander, to the world, and to myself. But now, I could reach out again, reconnect, and rebuild the bonds that had withstood the test of time. I found myself spending more time with my parents, who had always been my pillars of support. My mother, who had silently watched me endure years of emotional turmoil, often said to me, "I'm so proud of you, Sophia. You were always meant for so much more than this." Her words meant everything to me. I also reconnected with old friends from law school, many of whom had heard about my divorce and offered their support during the darkest times. I hadn't realized how much I missed the companionship and camaraderie until I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me. There were nights spent laughing until our sides ached, talking about the future, and remembering the days when life felt simpler. And these moments filled the gaps that had once been filled by loneliness. The longer I stayed in this new, refreshed life, the more I realized that it was built on the love and support of those who truly cared for me, not the empty promises and manipulation of Xander. Work, too, became a place where I thrived. I had always been a dedicated lawyer, but now I was truly passionate about the cases I took on. I threw myself into my work with newfound vigor, taking on high-profile cases and gaining respect from my peers. No longer weighed down by the constraints of my marriage, I had the freedom to focus solely on my career, to be the best version of myself. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the memories of Xander's betrayal would resurface, moments when I would find myself questioning if I had done the right thing. But those moments were fleeting. I had learned to move through the pain, to see it for what it was, a part of my past that no longer held any power over me. As I grew stronger in my career, I also began to think about what else I wanted from life. Did I want to get involved in a relationship again? The idea was tempting at times. I wasn't naive enough to think that love wasn't still a possibility, but I wasn't desperate for it anymore. I knew now that I didn't need a man to complete me. I didn't need anyone to define my worth. If love came into my life again, it would be because I chose it, not because I needed it to fill a void. One afternoon, as I was reviewing documents at my office, my phone buzzed with a text message. I didn't recognize the number, but when I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. It was from Xander. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I'm sorry for what happened, Sophia. I know it's too late for us, but I wanted to say I regret everything. You were the best thing in my life, and I ruined it." For a moment, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. A part of me wanted to respond, wanted to lash out, to make him feel the pain he had caused me all over again. But then I realized I didn't need to. His apology wasn't for me, it was for him. He was seeking redemption for himself, not for me. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could feel the weight of the past still lingering, but it no longer held me captive. I had moved on. I typed a simple reply. "It's too late for apologies, Xander. I've moved on, and I hope you can too." I hit send, and just like that, I let go of whatever last remnants of attachment I had. It felt oddly liberating. That message wasn't just for him, it was for me. It was my final closure, my last step toward fully embracing the future I had already started building. As the days turned into months, I kept moving forward. Life had so much to offer now, and I wasn't going to waste a single moment. I spent weekends exploring new hobbies, traveling to places I'd always wanted to visit, and enjoying my own company. I didn't need to be in a relationship to feel fulfilled. I was enough on my own, and that realization was a gift I would never take for granted. I looked out at the horizon one evening, the sun setting in a burst of color, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. I had come through the storm, and now I was standing on the other side, ready to embrace whatever came next. Xander's chapter was closed, and the rest of my story was mine to write. And this time, I wasn't looking back. As the months rolled on, I continued to build a life that felt more authentic and fulfilling than any I had known before. The past was no longer an anchor, but a memory that I had learned from. The pain, the heartbreak, the betrayals, it was all a part of my story now. But I was no longer defined by it. My future was mine to shape, and I was doing just that. Work remained my foundation. I had always been passionate about law, but now, with the clarity of a woman who had faced adversity and come out stronger, I dove into cases with an intensity I had never felt before. I was no longer just good at what I did, I was exceptional. My reputation continued to grow, and I found myself not only respected by my peers but sought after for high-profile cases. I had earned my place in this world, and I was determined to make the most of it. But work was only part of my new life. I had begun to allow myself the space to enjoy life outside of the office. I traveled more, exploring countries I had always dreamed of visiting. I found joy in the simple things, reading books I'd never had time for, taking long walks on quiet streets, spending time with friends who genuinely cared for me. One evening I found myself in Paris, a city I had always dreamed of visiting but had never made the time for. The Eiffel Tower stood tall against the sky, the city lights twinkling in the distance. I was sitting at a cafe, sipping coffee and watching the world go by. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with myself. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, I wasn't second-guessing my choices, and I wasn't longing for something or someone to fill a void. I had filled that void myself. On one of my return trips, I found myself sitting at dinner with my parents, talking about life, love, and everything in between. As we ate, my mother looked at me with a smile that had grown softer with age, a smile that reflected the joy she felt seeing her daughter happy again. "I'm so proud of you, Sophia," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I always knew you'd find your way back. You've always been strong, but this is something special." Tears pricked at my eyes as I looked at her. I didn't have to say anything. My mother had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, never judging, never pushing. She had simply been there. And now, watching me reclaim my life, she saw the woman I had always been capable of becoming. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied softly. It wasn't just my mother. My father, too, had always been my silent support, offering words of wisdom when I needed them most. His steady, calm demeanor had always been a grounding force for me. As I looked around the dinner table, I realized how much I had taken for granted before. The people who had always been there for me, even when I hadn't seen it. But it wasn't just the people in my life that had changed. I had changed. I was no longer the woman who let herself be defined by someone else's narrative. I was no longer the woman who stood in the shadows, shrinking to fit the mold of someone else's expectations. I was Sophia. I had made peace with the choices I had made in the past. Yes, I had loved Xander. Yes, I had once believed in the promises he made, but I also believed in the woman I had become, the woman who would not settle for anything less than respect, love, and authenticity. As I sat in the cafe in Paris, a moment of realization washed over me. I had done it. I had walked through the fire of betrayal and come out on the other side, not scorched and broken, but stronger, wiser, and more aware of who I was. I was no longer afraid of the unknown, because I had become the woman who could handle whatever life threw her way. A few weeks after my trip to Paris, I found myself thinking more seriously about relationships again. The idea of falling in love had seemed distant for so long, but now with the clarity I had gained, I wondered if it was time to open that door once more. But this time, it would be on my terms. I wasn't looking for validation or for someone to complete me. I had already done that for myself. What I wanted now was partnership. Someone who would stand beside me, someone who valued me for all that I was, flaws and all. I knew that it wasn't something that could be rushed. If it happened, it would happen naturally, and if it didn't, I was perfectly content with my own company. What mattered was that I had learned to embrace life fully, to laugh without inhibition, to love without fear, and to live without regrets. I was not the same woman who had been devastated by Xander's betrayal. I was someone new, someone who had learned how to heal, how to fight for herself, and how to move forward, no matter what. The months that followed were full of change. I continued to grow in my career, formed deeper bonds with friends and family, and even started mentoring young lawyers, sharing my experience and knowledge with those just starting out. I had found a deeper sense of purpose, one that extended beyond my personal growth. I wanted to give back, to ensure that others didn't have to go through what I did, to show them that they, too, could rise above the pain of betrayal and come out stronger. And then, one day, I stood on a balcony overlooking the city, my hands on the railing as I took in the view of the bustling streets below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought back to everything I had been through, the heartache, the uncertainty, and the fight for what was rightfully mine. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that I had created something beautiful from the wreckage. I had built a life that was mine and mine alone. A life that was full of promise, full of hope, and full of potential. Xander was a chapter in my past, a chapter that had closed, never to be revisited. The future was wide open, and I was ready for it. Ready for whatever came next. Because this time I knew one thing for sure. I would face it head on, and nothing could ever take that away from me. The dawn of a new life had arrived, and I was ready to embrace it.